Hello everyone. So in this video we'll be discussing about the market structure, or we can even say forms of market. So before moving to the market structure, we should understand that what actually market is. So market is not only a physical place or a particular shop or a showroom. It can be a whole region where buyers and sellers are in contact, or they come in contact to affect the demand and supply of a commodity. So let us take some examples of both kind of markets. So market can be physical also and virtual also. Physical markets such as the shops or the showrooms that we go, where we can go physically and buy our products and commodities. But in case of virtual markets, there nowadays we have online shopping platforms like Amazon, Flipkart. So these are also markets only. So now we'll be discussing about the four forms of market. So four forms of market that we'll be discussing are perfect competition, monopolistic competition, monopoly and oligopoly. We'll be discussing each of the market form in detail so that you have a clear understanding of each type of form of market. So before moving on to the forms of market, let's discuss one very important concept that we will be requiring in understanding the forms of market, which is the difference between a firm and an industry. So for example, there is a firm which produces Coca-Cola. So Coca-Cola company will be one firm. The other firm will be some Bisleri company. So these all firms, small firms, they come together in a market and they form one whole industry. So this is the main difference between a firm and an industry. So industry consists of many small or big firms. The first market form that we'll be studying is called as perfect competition. So what is perfect competition? Perfect competition is a type of market structure where there are large numbers of buyers and sellers, and they are selling a homogeneous product at a price which is fixed by the market. So now let us take an example. For example, a vegetable vendor or a vegetable market can be an example of a perfect competition, because all the vegetable vendors will be selling the same things. For example, they are selling vegetables such as tomatoes, or they are selling capsicum, or fruits like apples, guavas, banana. So they all are selling the similar or the homogeneous products, or we can even say that they are selling an identical product. So now what we'll do is we'll just discuss some of the features or the characteristics of this market structure so that it gets more clear to you that what this perfect competition actually means. So the first characteristic of perfect competition is that there are large numbers of buyers and sellers. So what does this actually mean, or what is the implication of this large numbers of buyers and sellers in a perfect competition market structure? So what happens is, if there are a large number of producers selling the same commodity which are identical in nature, or they are homogeneous products, so there are many firms which are selling the same product. So they don't have any price making decision or any decision making power in their hands, because they all are a part of industry, and they constitute of a small firm only. That is why they don't have any decision making power, or they are not the price makers, but they are the price takers, because all these firms which are selling the identical products, they will not decide their own price. The price would be decided by the industry, or it would be market determined price, which is actually set by the demand and supply forces. So they have to take into consideration that same price that has been set by the market. And what will happen if they sell at a very high price? For example, I am selling bananas, and a dozen of bananas will cost, for example, just taking an hypothetical situation, that I sell bananas, or the market determined price for selling one dozen of bananas is maybe 50 rupees. So if I as a banana seller sell that as 60 rupees, what will happen is my customers will not retain, and what will they do is they'll go to other vendors who are selling bananas, and they'll go to them because they'll be getting the same dozen of bananas from them at rupees 50. So why would they come to me and purchase their one dozen of bananas at rupees 60? Why would they pay 10 rupees extra? So this is what will happen if I as a vendor in a perfect competition will make my own price. So I have to take the price whatever is decided by the market. So in a perfect competition, the first thing is that there are large numbers of buyers and sellers. Second thing is that they are selling the identical or the homogeneous product, because of which they are the price takers and not the price makers. So in this example only we have covered 3 characteristics, or you can say the features of this perfect competition market. So we'll also be discussing one more characteristic or feature of this market structure, which is that the consumers have the full or the complete knowledge about the market. So in my case, if I just take the previous example which I was giving, if the consumer does not know in the market that what actually is the price of 1 dozen of banana, he might end up taking the 1 dozen of bananas at rupees 60 from me. But it is an assumption that all the consumers have complete information and complete knowledge about the prices, about the market, so they are not bluffed, or they cannot, vendors cannot play with them, and they know the correct prices. And if I am selling them at rupees 60, they'll say to me, the market determined price is 50, I won't be giving you that 10 rupees extra. Instead, I'll go to some other vendor and buy from him or her at rupees 15. Why would I make my loss? So this is one more feature or characteristic of perfect competition, that the buyers have complete knowledge about the market and the prices that are determined in the market. So now we'll be discussing this form of market structure with the help of a graph. So in this graph we'll be showing the demand curve. So as we can see, we have a straight demand curve in this form of market structure. This is because the elasticity is infinity, because the price remains same. The price will remain same because the price line is the demand line, and if you purchase either 1 unit of the commodity or you purchase 2 units of the commodity, the quantity will obviously increase, but your price will remain same. So I hope you understood the perfect competition market structure. Now we'll be discussing the second form of market structure, which is the monopoly form of market structure. So what does actually monopoly stand for? If you just break this word mono and poly, what do we get is mono means single and poly means seller. So monopoly means single seller. So this is a form of market structure where there is a single seller selling his products or offering his services with no close substitutes, and he is the price maker. He decides his own price because it is the firm which is forming an industry. So if you remember, in the starting we discussed the concept of industry and firm, but in this case the firm is only the industry because it is the alone seller in the market. So it is forming its own industry. So we'll just take an example. So the best example of this can be Indian Railways. So there is no substitute to Indian Railways. They are the sole sellers of providing this service to the customers of India. So now we'll be discussing about some characteristics or the features of this monopoly form of market structure. So the first feature of this market is that there is a single seller and a large number of buyers. Moving on to the second feature, which is that it has no close substitutes. Now, if I just elaborate on this feature, why I am saying it that there are no close substitute, because the example that we took, which was Indian Railways. So, railways do not have any close substitute. there are substitute, like people can either travel by air or by road. But if we just consider in case of traveling by railways or by rails, then we have only this example, and there is no close substitute. We haven't heard of any private or government initiative where there is any railways or this facility is provided to the consumers of India. It is only Indian Railways who is providing this facility to the customers of India. So this was the second feature, that it does not has any close substitute. The third thing or the third feature can be that there are strict barriers to entry. Like in this case, the Indian Railways is the sole seller, or you can say the single seller. There are no close substitute, because of which even if someone thinks, that or any private firm thinks that we should enter into this market or this segment, they'll think 100 times, because if a person or if any firm is there for a many number of years, then they have a good base, a good customer base. So if I, as a private firm, just enters, just taking a hypothetical example, that if I as a private firm want to provide the same facility to my customers or the consumers of India, then I might have this doubt in my mind, because since so many years, only Indian Railways was there. So their customer base is fixed. If I come into the market, there would be a big question mark whether people would be traveling in my railways or not. So the last feature that we'll be discussing of this monopoly market is that the firm is the price maker. So I have already discussed this, that why it is the price maker, because it is a single seller and it has a whole authority to decide its own price. The third form of market structure that we will be discussing is the monopolistic competition. So this form of market structure is actually the combination of monopoly and competitive markets. So we will be discussing in detail the features and characteristics of this form of market structure. So the first feature of this form of market structure is that there are a large number of buyers and sellers. I know you would be wondering that we discuss the same feature in perfect competition also. But here there is a bit difference. In perfect competition, they all were selling same product or homogeneous product or identical product. But in this case, or in this form of market structure, all the sellers are selling either substitute products or they are selling differentiated products. Their products are not identical to the other producer who is selling the same products. They can be heterogeneous or differentiated, or they can be a close substitute, but they are not same. So let us take an example of monopolistic competition, and with that it would be very clear to you that what actually monopolistic competition means. So let's take some industry. So let's take an example of a shoe industry. So there are so many firms. For example, Adidas is there, Reebok is there, Bata is there. So there are so many firms, so many companies selling shoes or footwear, but there is a twist, or there is something different that they all are offering to the customers, because all their products are not identical. Either it will differentiate in quality, or the design that they are offering, or the sole that they provide to their footwear. So these are the differentiating factors with which they are trying to make it a close substitute but not identical products. So that is why they have their different customer bases and they are in competition with other markets. Market structure, the firms can decide their own price and they can be selling cost also included, because they all are in competition with other firms that are selling the same type of products or commodities. For example, I am selling Bata products, so what I'll do is either I'll do some advertisement or I'll do some promotions. So for that I'll be requiring some money, and maybe to cover those costs I might keep the prices of my products that I'm offering, which would be different from the other firms that are offering. So I would be including my selling cost also in that. So every firm decide their own price, and they don't have a common price that everybody decide, because as I told, they all have some differentiating factors. So some might be using very good quality, so accordingly they'll set their price. Some might be using a bit lower quality, so their prices would be according to it. So they are not the price takers. In this form of market competition, they can make their own price or decide their own price. So the last form of market structure that we'll be discussing is oligopoly. So in oligopoly, the first thing that we need to remember is that there are a very few sellers. By very few, I mean that we can either count, or we can even count it on our fingers. But they should always be more than two, but less than what number of sellers are present in the monopolistic competition. So some examples of oligopoly can be some shipbuilding companies or aviation industry, because the number of sellers in these industries are a very few. We can even count them on our fingertips, and they are actually less than what is present in the monopolistic competition. So now we'll be discussing the features and the characteristics of this form of market structure. So this form of market structure can even be classified further into pure oligopoly or impure oligopoly. So let us understand what is pure oligopoly and what is impure oligopoly. So it's very simple. Pure oligopoly will be in case where sellers are selling homogeneous product, and impure oligopoly would be the case when sellers are selling heterogeneous product or differentiated products. So let us take one example of each case. Pure oligopoly means they are selling homogeneous product, which can be an example of a firm selling crude oil. Crude oil is homogeneous product only. But impure oligopoly, it can be an example of aviation industry. So there are very few firms, but they all have their own differentiating factor. We have Indigo, we have Air India, we have Vistara. So there are so many, but they all are offering different features or services to its clients or customers. So this was the further classification of the market structure oligopoly. So discussing about the features and characteristics, as I have already mentioned, that the sellers are very few. There are a large number of buyers in this form of market. Secondly, there could be advertisement or selling cost available, because everyone wants to be at the top, want to earn profit, wants their customer base to be strong. So for that, they'll do some promotions, some advertisement, so that they can attract their customer base and they can sell their products to them or offer their services to them. So this was all. I hope you understood the forms of market, or the 4 different forms of market structure.